Did Jaleel said he did say hello, but he was wondering if it was heard. It looks like he's still unmuted. You didn't hear him. I didn't hear him. Is that correct?
That's correct. Let's
Oh, there you go.
Jaleel,
Hi,
your line.
Can you hear me now? Hi, Dave Snyder. I'm sorry. Dave Snyder,
thank
can
you so
you
much
hear
for
me?
joining us. Yeah, we can hear you. We
Okay,
can hear you
good.
loud and clear. Thank you so much.
Right. Thanks. I'll be on by phone and not on the computer. So
Great.
thanks.
And can we do a quick check on Jaleel?
Sergio, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
All right, perfect.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, so I'm gonna. It was unmuted, so I'm just gonna go ahead and mute it again, Jaleel, and then when we get to the item, I'll make sure that I mute. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's noon, and we have 38 participants on the line. I'm happy that you can join us. Please mute your lines to reduce any background noise, and we will give everyone one more minute before we start the meeting. Was there a question?
Yeah, this is Dave Snyder. I will need to leave the meeting for a couple minutes and then come back. So I just wanted to let you know that I'm in attendance.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, it's 12:01, and we have 44 participants on the line for today's meeting. One final reminder to please mute your lines when you're not speaking to reduce any background noise. And with that, I'll pass it to you, Madam Chair, for today's meeting.
Thank you, Sergio. Appreciate all of your technical voodoo back there. Welcome to the Wednesday, July 22nd, 2020 virtual meeting of the Transportation Planning Board. Good afternoon. I am Kelly Russell, the chair of the Transportation Planning Board, and I call the meeting to order. I'll start with a review of the procedures I'll be using during this virtual meeting. In addition to live audio streaming, this virtual meeting is being streamed on YouTube. Essentially, the screen we are seeing on our computers and the audio of our discussions are being broadcast. You'll recall that we used to have an audience of residents and staffs during our in-person meetings. Broadcast on YouTube is another way to reach out to the residents of this region with this virtual meeting. For my colleagues on the board, please keep the email you received from Conti handy, as it has useful information on participating in the meeting and, importantly, the process to follow in case of any technical disruptions during this session. First, I'm going to ask Lynn to take a roll call of the members or alternates to document your presence at the meeting. Second, in the interest of time, we'll forego staff presentations just on items 3 and 5. These will be the report of the technical committee and the steering committee. Written reports have been provided in our package. Lastly, for each agenda item, I will have the presenter complete their presentation and then invite questions from members in turn by jurisdiction. I will similarly call for votes by jurisdiction in turn. And as Sergio mentioned, a friendly reminder to stay muted and then unmute your mic and state your name and jurisdiction when you do speak. Okay, Lynn, would you please take roll call and confirm we have quorum?
Thank you. Good morning, or now good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to run through the math to capture your attention. If I miss you or you take too long to unmute, don't worry. You can write it in the chat, or you can email me. So I'm just going to go down the list. We'll start with the District of Columbia. District Council Phil Mickelson. District Council Charles Allen. We did get notice that he was going to be unable to attend, just so you all know. District Council Brandon Todd.
This is his alternate, Sam Stevens.
Thank you, Sam. District Department of Transportation.
This is Jim Sebastian.
Hi, Jim. District Office of Planning.
Andrew Trueblood's here.
Hello. Now we'll move on to Maryland. College Park. I missed Patrick or Denise. Wait, I'll come back. Frederick County.
Ron Burns, proud to be present, representing Frederick County.
Hello. City of Frederick.
I am here, Kelly Russell.
Thanks. Gaithersburg.
Neil Harris is here.
Hi, Neil. City of Greenbelt.
Slinger is here.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Emmett
City of Laurel.
from City of Greenbelt here.
Oh, hi, too. So we got Dennis Unzigler, and then I got Emmett. Great. City of Laurel. Free County.
Kevin Glass is here.
Montgomery.
Gary Ehrenrich is here.
Good morning or good afternoon. Prince County Council.
Councilmember Demi Tavares.
Bellamy, Prince George County.
So Prince George's County Executive, Mr. Bellamy, thank you.
And Vic Weisberg is also on the call.
Thanks. City of Rockville.
Bridget Newton's here.
Hello.
Hi.
City of Tacoma Park.
Yeah, Casey Kostek. Can you hear me?
Hello, Casey. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
Maryland
great.
Department of Transportation.
Earl Lewis is here.
Earl. Thank you. Maryland House of Delegates.
Mark Foreman.
Hello. And then Maryland Senate is actually a vacant seat. So now we'll move on to Virginia. City of Alexandria. Arlington County.
Christian Dorsey is present.
Thank you. City of Fairfax.
David Meyer is present.
Thank you. Fairfax County.
James Walkinshaw is here.
Thank you. City of Falls Church.
Mr. Snyder
Mr.
was.
Snyder.
Yeah. He'll be coming back.
Thank you. Fauquier County. Loudoun County.
Kristen Umstadt is here.
Bob Brown is here.
Thank you both. City of Manassas.
Pam Sabeski here.
Thank you. City of Manassas Park.
Jeanette Rischel here.
Thank you. Prince William County.
Ann Wheeler is here, and I was also here on the 17th, but that's not reflected in the minutes.
Okay, we can update the minutes.
Thank you.
Victor Angry is here, Prince William County.
Thank you. And Virginia Department of Transportation.
Maria is here.
Thanks, Maria. And then our seats from the Virginia House and Senate are vacant, so we'll move on to
This is Sean.
Hey, I just wanted to say that Kennick.
Kennick Aguirre from Alexandria, was that you?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. And I heard Mr. Canan, so now we'll go to our ex officio non-voting members, Federal Highway Administration. So I did just email because Sandra asked the information. So I'm assuming she'll join us if she hasn't already. Federal Transit Administration. National Capital Planning Commission. saw Julia. Are you still there? So you're on mute, but I'll capture you anyway. Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority.
I'm here.
Oh, hi, thanks, Julia.
Okay.
Metropolitan Washington Authority. And lastly, National Park Service. That concludes the roll. And I will capture anybody I see in the chat if you were unable to speak, or you can send me an email. Ms. Russell, back to you.
This is Jason Groth, Charles County.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else, latecomers?
This is Patrick Brown from College Park.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you so much, Lynn. That's a labor of love there. Next, the public comments portion of our meeting. I understand we've received comments from the public, many comments. As we are not able to hear directly from commenters in this virtual setting, staff has reviewed all of the comments and compiled them into a memo. The memo and full comments are posted on the meeting website, and Lynn is going to review for us the comments received. Lynn?
Thanks, Russell. So, of course, this last person, we would invite the public to come speak in front of us. But as you know, in lieu of this, we've been offering the opportunity to email comments. So I would like to report that we received 42 positive and constructive comments, actually. So I'm going to share our summary of these comments. You can read all 31 pages containing each comment yourself. However, that's going to take a lot of time. So in the meantime, we put together a short summary for you, and I'm going to go through that right now. So we set up a memo sort of to just separate it out into 3 parts for ease of understanding. So our part A summarizes the contents of the comments and the feedback, which was sent to our main comment line. Part B lists the names of individuals and the organizations who submitted the comments. And part C of this memo contains all of the comments themselves. And I do want to add that everybody who submitted a public comment, every email received, also received an email from us thanking them and providing information on how to access the summary, as well as the ways in which to listen and to watch the live stream of this meeting. So our comments that we received go through part A here. So we divided up the comments into basically into 2 sections. Comments we received on the National Capital Trail Network and comments on equity. So I am going to go through just these 2 pages of the memo and then turn it back to Ms. Russell and ask questions. So really, in support of the National Capital Trail Network, many of the comments emphasize that the network is important because of the surge in bike and pedestrian use throughout the region, putting a strain on the safe use of existing infrastructure, and there's a need for more infrastructure to keep up with our demand. Building the National Capital Trail Network will create an expansive interconnected transportation network that will allow healthy carbon-reducing transportation alternatives. Completion of a balanced network on all sides of the Washington region will also address equity issues, where those least likely to own an automobile also have less access to trails that can provide safety and health benefits. Some of our comments that we received express the crucial role of trails in providing safe options for walking and bicycling during our current health emergency. Trails can provide safe mediums to continue using e-scooters and e-bikes for commuting purposes. Connected trails have been proven to increase local business revenue from local and regional tourists, as well as property values near the trails. Recreational trails are critical pieces of the livability of a city, in which trails encourage active transportation, improve residents' health, and inspire a connection with natural surroundings. They provide greater connectivity, safety, and accessibility for communities living east of the Anacostia River, and it's an equity issue that the National Capital Trail Network can address. There needs to be more connectivity across the river within Wards 7 and 8 and with communities in Prince George's County, Maryland. The National Capital Trail Network can enable transit-oriented development and sustainable growth. The trails should be built to serve as the backbone to the multimodal transportation system of 2045. The National Capital Trail Network will offer safe biking infrastructure in more neighborhoods, and this can increase more diversity among bicyclists. So there were comments we received also with recommendations for the National Capital Trail Network. And here we talk about how particular care must be given to trails which pass through natural areas. Restoration, recreation, and transportation goals must be considered. The board is urged to work closely with the Restoration Partnership and the Departments of the Environment. We received comments on equity, where the board, in this case, the board is asked to take a look at gender mainstreaming while making policy, spending, and budget decisions similarly as the board has done with racial equity as a fundamental value. And lastly, we received some comments in support of the safety resolution. So the board is urged to incorporate language specifically calling for road design region-wide to improve safety for pedestrians, bicyclists, and users with disabilities. And lastly, given the board's commitment to equity, the board is asked to commit to focusing on making arterial roads in low-income and minority communities safer. So the rest of the memo basically lists the organizations and the citizens and the folks who had provided comments, and then the comments themselves. So if any one of these items that I had just read quickly to you strike your interest, please feel free to flip through the rest of the document where you can find more details on those comments. Chair Russell, that's all I have.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you to staff for compiling all of that information into the quick and dirty guide of ideas of the today's list. I really appreciate the fact that there were 42 public responses. I try and shoot for that every time. Public participation is great. With that, we'll move on to the approval of the June 17th, 2020 meeting minutes. There was a correction proposed. I believe it was Member Michelle. It's not shown in the attendee list. So with that correction, can I have a motion to adopt the minutes of the June 17th?
So moved.
I'll make that
This
motion.
is Casey Kostick from Tacoma Park.
Okay, can you all hear me okay? I have a motion and a second. Lynn, did you get the names?
Yes, Mr. Emmett Jordan made the motion and it was seconded.
Okay. And you can still hear me clearly?
We do have some disturbance with the audio.
Okay, I will try to resolve that. Hang on 1 second. Is this any better? I'm so sorry.
No, not really.
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, what we're getting is it's computer based. So what's happening? So what I recommend is maybe we'll mute your PC or just mute your audio from your PC, and then let's have you call in separately, and I'll send the call-in information right now. So the first chat box was the number, and the second chat box is the meeting ID.
Hello? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Oh, now we have an echo. Okay. All right. Now, Howie. Victory is mine. Okay. I believe we had a motion and a second. Any corrections or comments? Is that me echoing? Any abstentions or nays from the District of Columbia? Abstentions or nays from Maryland? Abstentions or nays from Virginia?
Abstention from VDOT. I wasn't present.
Thank you. Abstention from VDOT. Any abstentions or nays from WMATA or other federal agencies? An abstention from College Park, I see in the. Are you hearing me?
Madam Chair, I hear you loud and clear.
Okay, very good. We'll be on to the technical committee report then. We have a written summary of our technical committee's July 19th meeting. Any questions for Kyle Nemhart, chair of our technical committee from the district? Maryland? Virginia? WMATA or other agencies? Very good. Okay, on to the Citizens Advisory Committee and Access for All Advisory Committee reports. First, I invite Nancy Abeles, Chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee, to share her summary of the committee's discussions this month. We do have a written summary of the July 16th meeting. Nancy, take it away.
Thank you, Chair Russell, and I apologize in advance. They're doing tree trimming in my community, so I hope it's not overheard. The 2020 CAC met for an online meeting on Thursday, June 16th. We discussed two items on today's TPG agenda: safety recommendations and the National Capital Trail Network. We also provided feedback on the Visualize 2045 website and development. Safety recommendations update. John Sherman, TPB Transportation Planner, briefed the committee on the board's discussion about the safety recommendations at the June meeting. He described the changes that have been made and walked the committee through the resolution. He also presented on the connection between CAC input on safety over the past 18 months and recommendations in the resolution. The committee endorses Board Resolution R3-2021 to approve a set of regional safety recommendations and actions. The committee made the following statement. The 2020 Citizens Advisory Committee endorses prompt adoption of TPB's proposed safety resolution R3-2021. The committee supports inclusion of an equity statement in the resolution and encourages the board and staff to extend an equity perspective to all their work. The committee supports the TPB's vision and aspirations to reduce and eliminate transportation-related fatalities and serious injuries in the region. The committee is eager to see the resolution and countermeasures applied equitably and consistently within respective jurisdictions and throughout the region. The committee believes that this action is significant and looks forward to working with the board to make the region safer for everyone. Then we discussed the National Capital Trail Network. Michael Farrell, TPB Transportation Planner, briefed us on updates to the network. And the committee supports the updated trail network and is excited that the new network will connect all jurisdictions in the region by trail. Other business, I walked the committee through the discussion at the last TPB meeting. Lynn Erickson, TPB Plan Development and Coordination Program Director, walked the committee through today's TPB agenda. Abigail Zenner, TPB Communications Specialist, shared the Visualize 2045 with the website with the committee and led to an activity to identify ways to improve the site and make it clearer. And that was a fun way to conclude our meetings for our August break. So we wish the TPB a safe and good August. And thank you. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Are there any questions from Ms. Abeles? That's a terrific presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll now invite our colleague, Casey Kostick, Chair for the Access for All Committee, to share her summary of the committee's discussions this month. Casey?
Thank you. I hope my audio is all right. I've been having some trouble with it. Yes, so the Access for All Committee met in early July, and we discussed two main items. The first is COG's activities to advance racial equity. We heard from Ms. Scheider, Principal Health Planner for COG, who talked about COG's partnership with the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, GARE, and discussed the inaugural GARE cohort, which is representing 11 jurisdictions and over 100 government staff, and was launched in September of 2019. And there's going to be a second year implementation phase and a cohort open to all 24 jurisdictions that COG represents starting in early 2021. Then we heard a little from one of the participants in the GARE cohort. I can say just from my personal experience, Tacoma Park has been participating in the cohort as well and has found it to be extremely useful. We heard from Mr. John Filer, who is Chief Emergency Medical Services for Charles County, Maryland. And he talks about their cohorts project, which is working on improving the county's public transportation system, VanGo, to better support the needs of people of color. He talked about how VanGo's service area includes areas that are food deserts, how the project has helped to identify the true needs of ridership, which were service on Sundays rather than extended evening hours during the week, which had originally been part of the plan to expand service, and the current inability to meet demand due to COVID restrictions for buses to operate at 50% capacity. Then AFA members discussed equity in the region overall a little, as well as the particular project, and expressed concerns related to the east-west divide when it comes to transportation, as well as the digital gap and a need for new outreach methods to connect with traditionally underserved communities, especially during the COVID time. After that, we heard from Mr. John Sherman, similar to the CAC, who talked about the Regional Roadway Safety Study. And AFA members were particularly interested in the data and the information about pedestrians and pedestrian safety. Some of the requests and the things that people were interested in included data on distracted pedestrians, whether there was a race or ethnicity breakdown of the data. And they also pointed out that the data showed more crashes where older adults age 85 plus were the drivers, but older adults were defined in the document as 65 plus. So they were interested in maybe breaking down those numbers a little more to kind of get at more clearly where the particular differences are. And there's interest in the committee on hearing more in the future in the final report and plans for dissemination. And then finally, I presented briefly on the TPB's Curbside Management Forum and discussed with members some of their concerns related to accessibility for curbside access, and members shared concerns such as how outdoor restaurant seating that has popped up due to COVID has decreased public space and thoroughfares for people with disabilities, as well as a need to have more drop-off zones near metro stations in urbanized areas. We're hoping, and it sounds like there are plans for a future curbside management forum where AFA members would participate on a panel to share their experiences and concerns as well. And then finally, we heard from Virginia Tech PhD student who is working on a very interesting research project focusing on the accessibility of ride-hailing companies. And she offered an opportunity to AFA members to participate in that. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Casey. Are there any questions? Terrific. Thank you so much. All right, we're on to steering committee actions and report of the director. We do have a written summary of our July 10th steering committee meeting and report from our staff director, Conti. Conti, is there anything that you'd like to add to the steering report?
Conti, you're currently on mute, so we cannot hear you, Conti. Let's try again, Conti.
Okay. Can you hear me? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I don't have anything else to add other than just to notify that in September, we plan to provide you with the results of the first wave of limited surveys we Commuter Connections has undertaken to determine the impact and the plans for teleworking during the current phase and importantly during the post-pandemic phase. So we expect to bring those results to you sometime in September.
Outstanding. I will ask for any questions for Conti. We'll start with the district. Maryland. Virginia. WMATA or other agencies. Great. Okay, thank you, Conti. On to Chairman's remarks. Before I make my remarks, I do have a couple of very special recognitions to make. First, this will be the last meeting for Ron Burns, an alternate member for Frederick County. After more than 34 years of service, Ron's going to be retiring later this summer, he says. Ron's been actively participating in the TPB Technical Committee, Board, and other committee meetings since 2010. He's been a consultant, worked at MNC PPC, Maryland State Highway Administration, MDOT, Maryland Port Authority, and then finally here in Frederick County. On a personal note, Ron has been one of my mentors for several years and has helped me grow professionally and personally. I'm proud to call him friend. Ron, congratulations for your distinguished career. Thank you for your service, and we wish you happiness and health in retirement. Is there anything that you'd like to say, Ron?
Well, thank you, Kelly. I have my certificate here. It's nice to get a certificate that's framed and matted. That's a class act all the way around. But nonetheless, I've started working with COG back with George Wickstrom back in the mid '80s, and it's been a labor of love, and the staff I always felt was giving me a lot more than I could ever give back. So here's to the best MPO in America and its leadership, and its staff continues to be number one. Thank you very much.
Ron, thank you. Enjoy whatever it is that you're going to do next. Next, this will also be the last meeting for another alternate member of the board, Jim Sebastian of the District Department of Transportation. I understand that Jim will be leaving DDOT after 20 years, and he also worked at COG as staff to the TPB back in the late 1990s. While Jim has worked on several different topics, his achievements in promoting walking and biking have greatly helped improve mobility in this region. Jim, we wish you happiness and health and the very best in your next endeavor. Is there anything that you'd like to share with us?
Sorry, I just had to unmute. I've got my certificate also. Thank you very much. Yeah, it seems like just yesterday I was staff in the back of the room, hoping there might be some leftover lunch by the end of the meeting. I really enjoyed the discussions back then in the late 90s, and have been following, of course, TPB activity ever since then. It's a great place to bring the region together and have discussions of transportation issues, and I'll continue to follow, and it's been a real honor. Never thought I'd be on the other side of the dais, but for the last couple of years, it's been great to be in that position and see things from a different perspective. Great work, everybody.
No, we greatly appreciate you and wish you the best in everything that you do. Thank you so much for your service. Okay, now on for the chair's remarks. Last month as a board, we discussed the social unrest following the death of George Floyd at the hands of the police on May 2020. We acknowledged the social awakening to this regrettable legacy of racism that we in the street, still fellow humans living and working together in our communities. It's our responsibility and obligation to conduct our daily activities thoughtfully, with fairness and respect for one another. We said that at the TPB that we will continue our commitment to equity, and we will work diligently and deliberately to enhance our conscious efforts toward equity in everything we do, focused on providing fair and equitable mobility and accessibility to all residents and travelers in this region. I believe that we should codify this resolve so that equity considerations are always a part of the conversation. To that end, I'm proposing a resolution that would further spell out and reinforce that the TPB as an organization is fully committed to conducting all its activities in a manner that not only promotes equity, but is anti-racist. A draft of the resolution was included in the read-ahead packet. I will ask Conti to briefly review the draft resolution, and then we can consider our action on it. Conti?
Certainly, Madam Chair, thank you. I will first briefly highlight the whereas clauses for background and context for today's action. And then I will review the specific elements of the result clause. The resolution notes that equity has been an important policy consideration to the TPB that is noted in its vision statement from 1998. It is reflected in its call to promote prosperity, accessibility, livability, and sustainability for all throughout the region, as espoused in COG's Region Forward document. And the environmental justice analysis that TPB conducts on its long-range transportation plan to determine if the lower-income population and racial minority groups experience any disproportionate or desperate negative burden from the transportation investments. And also in its 2017 identification of areas within this region as equity emphasis areas or areas to be considered to emphasize it. The resolution reaffirms that the TPB believes equity is a fundamental value and defines it as the commitment to promote fairness and justice in the development and implementation of projects, programs, and policies. It recognizes that the TPB members are increasingly committing to intentionally consider equity when making policies or delivering programs and services. And the TPB condemns inequitable treatment of any group of people on any basis and reaffirms its commitment to equity in all aspects of transportation planning and programming. The TPB then resolves that the TPB and its staff commit to being guided by the following statement on equity. And the statement proposed is every action that the TPB considers, including every debate we have and every decision we make as the region's MPO, must be viewed through the lens of justice, equity, and fairness. We must recognize past actions that have been exclusionary or had desperate impacts on people of color and marginalized communities. And we must take actions to correct or mitigate the resulting unfairness. From infrastructure to education and enforcement, we must act fairly to ensure equitable and true access to safety, accessibility, and mobility. That is a brief review of the draft resolution that was included in the email packet, Ms. Chair.
Thank you very much, Conti. So at this point, I would like to hear your thoughts on this. I will need to have a motion.
Madam Chair, Pam Sabeski, Manassas City. I'd like to go ahead and make the motion to accept this resolution so that we can go into discussion as well.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Jeanette Rischel, Manassas Park, I second.
Thank you. So I'm going to call on folks for their thoughts. I'm going to start with Virginia and Mr. Christian Dorsey, as he actually sits on the COG board as the TPB representative. So I would ask if he has some comments to make, and then we'll move on to the rest of our jurisdictions.
Thank you, Chair Russell, and I appreciate the work of the Executive Committee in offering this statement. It is incredibly strong, And I wanted to just reference that the COG Board of Directors at its previous meeting last month approved an equity statement, which, as you could imagine, is different in language. And I thought that there might be an opportunity here to develop a greater crosswalk between the two. Given that we are housed in the same building, we are working towards the same values. And unfortunately, when things diverge, even in terms of language that is used, it can invite an opportunity for people to question, well, why is one different from the other? So in an effort to bridge that and to take this very strong statement on the TPB's principles and better align it, not to be a mirror image, but to be more complementary to what COG did, I offer the following as what I hope is a friendly amendment, because it does not change the tenor or tone, or I believe the substance, but creates that greater crosswalk between the two. And don't worry about all of the ways in which it looks like things have been changed. The suggestions are largely just to strengthen the already strong statement that is before you. So it does impact the language of some of the whereas clauses and includes several at the end of the ones that were already drafted. And I'll give everybody an opportunity to sit with that. I don't want to read to everyone. And then we can probably scroll up, because when we get to the resolved section, there's more language added. And what this does is specifically take the framework that was offered in the original statement, but including a very definitive statement that our work together, in addition to advancing equity, will also be anti-racist, that will permeate every action, every decision, and every debate that we have. That we also commit to having equity woven throughout everything that we do. And specifically, it's called out in our analyses, our operations, procurement, programs, and priorities. And then the rest is just really a little wordsmithing to make it all make a little bit more sense from a sentence structure. So I'd love if there could be consideration by Ms. Sebeski to take that as a friendly amendment and offer it for the TPB's consideration.
I'm so willing.
Thank you. Is there a second willing?
Mr. Shaw seconded the motion.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Very good. Mr. Dorsey, thank you so much for these really impactful changes to better align the two organizations. I will call for other comments from Virginia, and then we'll go to the rest of the jurisdictions. Anyone else from Virginia?
Hello, Dave Snyder. I joined a bit late. I just wanted to indicate that I am here and fully supportive of the amended resolution. Thank you to all who drafted it.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Okay, we'll hear from our friends in the District of Columbia, if there are any. Any comments from the state of Maryland? And last but not least, WMATA and other federal agencies. Okay. Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Dorsey, for these thoughtful additions. Given the general sense of support on the matter I heard last month, and since then, perhaps I will just ask if there are any abstentions. Are there any abstentions from the District of Columbia? Any abstentions from the state of Maryland? Any abstentions from the Commonwealth of Virginia? and any abstentions from WMATA or other federal agencies? Thank you all. I will take that as unanimous support. I believe this is truly one of the most important measures TPB has ever adopted, and I commend you all for taking this stand. Thank you. On to action items, which we really haven't had for a while, so I'm looking forward to lots of action today. We're going to start with the Regional Car-Free Day 2020 proclamation. We will not be adopting a resolution. I'm going to just seek unanimous consent for the TPB to issue a proclamation. Nick's going to review the proclamation and brief us on the plans for this year's Car-Free Day. Note I'm wearing my Car-Free Day button. I suspect this year we will have many fewer cars on the road on this day, given that we have all experienced that many of us can be as, if not more productive, without having to drive. Nick?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hopefully everyone can hear me. So I just wanted to give everybody a little bit of background on Car-Free Day, which is going to be coming up in September. Next slide. Just to give you a little bit of background, the event started in Europe in 1995 and it went global in the early 2000s, and it's celebrated in about 1,500 cities in 40 countries. Next slide. And these are just some photos from last year's event in some various locations around the world. So we have London, Bogota, and Jakarta. As you can see, there's some massive amounts of people out on Car-Free Day for those particular events. Next slide. This event coincides with the Europeans' Mobility Week, which is an annual campaign that's focused on sustainable urban mobility. That week is from September 16th to the 22nd. And the overall goal is to help improve public health and quality of life through clean mobility and sustainable urban transport. Next slide. And that week coincides on Car-Free Day, which is on September 22nd. And a lot of the participating cities set aside one or more areas solely just for ped bike and public transportation for the entire day. That's been a bit of a challenge for us over the years, but as Chairman Russell mentioned, there aren't a lot of folks out on the streets now, so there may be a little bit more propensity to do something like that in our region. Next slide. We do get a lot of media coverage. These are just some headlines from last year's event, and there is a lot of interest from the media. Next slide. The event here in the DC region started in the District of Columbia back in 2007, and it went regional in the following year. And our overall goal is to promote alternative forms of transportation, which includes transit, bike, and walk, as well as car-like methods such as carpools and vanpools, as well as telework. Next slide. And the event is not just for commuters. We also try and attract other parts of the population, including senior citizens, students, folks who ordinarily travel by SOV, whether it's work or to do an errand or go to class. Our overall pledge goal for this year is 11,000, and the 2020 event is, it's on a Tuesday this year, which is good because the last couple of years it's fallen on the weekend, and it's tough to try and get folks to participate when it's on a Saturday or Sunday. So Tuesday, September 22nd is the date for this year. Next slide. And today we're going to be asking you to approve a proclamation. This is the signing from last year's event when we were all in person at COG. That proclamation is in your agenda packet for today. Next slide. And we're also going to be encouraging local jurisdictions to adopt similar proclamations. This is an example from last year. This is from the city of Tacoma Park. And there were other jurisdictions across the region that also adopted proclamations for Car-Free Day. Next slide. There's a website for the event. It's carfreemetrodc.org, and we'll be updating that website as we move along. And there's also a leaderboard on the next slide that basically shows how many folks pledged by travel mode. So we'll be keeping track of that as the pledges come in. And then next slide, we have a number of promotional materials. This year, because of the coronavirus pandemic, we're going to be making those materials available virtually. So we won't be printing anything up. And just to make it easier for employers to be able to download that information. Next slide. There's also social media sites on Facebook and Twitter. So for those of you who are active on those sites, we'd appreciate a call out for the event and just letting folks know that you're in support of it. And then we will also have some paid social media on the next slide that essentially focuses in on the various modes that we'll be promoting. And I will say we'll probably be taking a more prominent role in promoting telework, bike, and walk this year because of the current situation that we're in. However, that doesn't mean that we won't be promoting other modes of transportation, such as ride sharing or transit, but there will be a safety and health message attached to those messages. Next slide. There'll also be some native articles that we'll be promoting. These are some examples from last year from WTOP and Popville, which are two popular sites. And then on the next slide, we also will be doing some ads. We did some ads last year on Spotify and YouTube. We'll probably be doing some additional outreach on these types of channels as well. Next slide. And you can go ahead, one more slide. We do have a number of sponsors from last year that we're reaching out to, and we're also looking for new sponsors for this year. And this really helps with some of the incentives of getting folks to pledge. And then on the next slide, we're coordinating with all of the local transit properties to promote the event. And these are some examples of last year's promotions on the various transit agencies. And we're in the process of solidifying those agreements right now. Next slide. This event really counts on local jurisdictions' support and participation. We do have a Car-Free Day steering committee, and several of the jurisdictions who are part of that committee put on their own events. So these are just some examples from last year from the city of Manassas, Montgomery County, Charles County, and there were some outdoor events. I would venture to say that we're not going to have a lot of the in-person events that we had last year just because of the current situation, but there'll be other types of things that we'll be able to put forth. We know the American League of Bicyclists, they've determined that they really want to promote Car-Free Day for bicyclists just because we had to cancel Bike to Work Day this past May. So there'll be, we're not going to be having pit stops or anything along those lines, but there might be some rides that may be organized and that type of thing as we move forward. We do have some partnerships that are outlined on the next slide. We'll be partnering with Clean Air Partners here at the Council of Governments. You can go to the next slide. And we also will be promoting the event with the American Heart Association and the American Lung Association. We may be looking at an incentive promotion. This is still kind of up in the air, but this is what we did last year. We gave some extra points to folks if they pledge to go car-free through our incentive mobile app. We're taking a look at that, but we're not sure if we're going to be able to do that again this year. But it's something that we're reviewing. The other thing that we do, next slide, is we work with all of the area colleges, and we put together a campus challenge. Last year, Georgetown University walked away with that distinction, and American University and the University of Maryland came in second and third place. But we want to work with the colleges to get the college students and the faculty involved with the event. So we'll be working through the consortium of universities in the region to see if we can promote the event again this year. And then on this next slide, which is a review of our pledges from last year, As you can see, those went up a little bit, but the event was on a Sunday. It just gives you the pledges by year and then the mode that was used for each of the 3 jurisdictions, DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So we did have a pretty good participation in all of the modes from the various jurisdictions. And then on this last slide, I just want to also reiterate that we are aware of what's happening right now in the current situation. So we are changing up our message a little bit. We did ask for feedback from our steering committee. There will be a health and safety message associated with the event. We recently published a Commute with Confidence clearinghouse. There were a lot of recommendations on there on how commuters could use the various alternative modes based on CDC guidelines, as well as individual transit agency guidelines. And so that is available and it's up on our web. We've been promoting that and we will continue to promote it as we move through the pandemic and as part of this event as well. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. That was the last slide.
Are there any questions for Nick? Okay.
I'm sorry. This is Councilmember Denny Taveras from Prince George's County. Did you focus test the slogan "Commute with Confidence"? Because I kind of feel that in some of our communities, folks are just not wearing masks. I would say I would kind of switch that up to say commute safely, you know, or something to instruct people on how to do it in a safe manner.
Yes, so on our page on the web, there are, and I would encourage you to visit the site. It's at commuterconnections.org. On the homepage, if you click on that, you will see that the entire page is full of safety messages, health messages, how to properly use, or with recommendations of the various modes. So really, the Commute with Confidence is just kind of a catch-all message, but the whole idea behind it is safety and health. And so that's essentially all the information that's on there. It's in a downloadable PDF as well, so employers and others can use it to promote it internally or put it on their website, or take parts of it that would make sense for their particular work site. And it's there's a lot of good information there, and we did coordinate with our entire network to make sure that everybody felt comfortable with that messaging.
No, I totally
Nick. That's great. It's very
positive. I was just concerned with the fact that, there are some folks that, regardless of how much they hear or they're told, just don't.
Yeah.
So that's the.
I think. Yeah, I think the message from all of us, each of us, as members of TPB and elected appointed officials, have to continue to convey, wearing a mask and being safe. I think we all have that responsibility. I appreciate that feedback.
And not only that, I mean, if you look at our COVID numbers, 73% of all COVID cases are Hispanics in Montgomery County. I haven't seen the racial breakdown in Prince George's, but I wouldn't think that, given what I see in my district, I don't think that that's much different in Prince George's County. So those are, and a lot of this hasn't been translated either. So I think that if you're going to do social media, I would also urge you to translate. But those.
Yeah, I will say we do have a translation component as part of Car Free Day, so we will be doing that. So yeah, we'll get that information out as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Is there anybody else that has any comments on the Car Free Day proclamation? Okay. Nick, do you think you can hand me that proclamation so I can sign it?
So we'll need to get, Madam Chair, we'll need to get an approval for the proclamation.
We do. Okay. So I will ask if there is a motion to approve the proclamation.
So moved.
By? Please say your name.
Patrick Wyan from College Park.
Second by Pam Sebesky.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Can we all agree to proclaim September 22nd as Car-Free Day? Are there any abstentions? I'm just going to ask for abstentions from any jurisdiction. I can't imagine. Okay, with that, I will take that as unanimous consent. All right. Now, the moment we've all been waiting for.
So Madam Chair, we're normally, when we're in the board, we would come up to the dais and hand you the proclamations, but since we're not together today, I'm going to hand this off to you for you to sign. So.
And I'm going to step into my magic portal and accept that proclamation.
Members could scroll down or can click right to see Kelly's video since she's on the phone. Somehow,
okay,
proclamation has arrived.
I don't know if you can see me on screen here, but it traveled through time, and I now have the proclamation, and we'll sign. And there it is.
Thank you.
Thank you for that bit of magic and levity. Okay, terrific. We're on to the Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program for Maryland TPB jurisdictions. Under this item, we will be selecting transportation alternative projects in Maryland to receive federal funds. Earlier this year, we selected projects in Virginia. I understand we will be doing the same for the district later this year. Julie O from COGS Community Planning and Services Department staff will brief us on the recommended projects. After that, I will be seeking a motion to adopt Resolution R2-2021. Julie O, take it away.
All right, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All righty. Thanks so much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. I'm Jaleel Reed, Regional Planner with the Department of Community Planning and Services in coordination with the Department of Transportation. Pleased today to present recommendations for our FY21 Maryland projects to receive funding under the Federal Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program, commonly referred to as TAP. TAP funding provides the TPB and COG with the chance to fund capital improvement programs and help actualize some of our regional priorities, things like pedestrian access, safety for vulnerable populations, and access to economic opportunity. This year's set of recommended projects for Maryland are particularly focused on making it safer for kids to get to and from school. Next slide. So a quick overview of the presentation. Overall, I'll briefly describe the Federal Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program and our role in the Maryland process. At the end of the presentation, we'll be seeking your approval for the recommended projects, and John Swanson and I will be on hand to address any questions you might have. Next slide. So the Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program was established in 2012, actually under a slightly different name that was ultimately updated in 2015. It's a federal program that is designed to provide funding to local jurisdictions to do good small projects that to a large extent are designed to enhance pedestrian and bicycle access, including trails and access to transit. The TPB's role with TAP is defined by federal law, and as a large MPO, we're provided the sub-allocated funding to select projects in our region, but this really goes beyond federal requirements. TAP's funding provides an opportunity for us as a region to fund regional priorities. We've tried to emphasize those priorities throughout our application process. We ultimately rely on the states who administer the projects, though, to actually do the solicitation and screen applications for eligibility. And once our board has selected projects, the state departments of transportation, respectively, are then responsible for getting these projects implemented. And we're very grateful for them for them taking on that role. But I guess just to take a step back and provide a bit of additional context, and Madam Chair, you hinted to this at the outset of the presentation, we at the NPO are part of 3 separate state-level selection processes in coordination with the Department of Transportation's within our footprint. So not only the Maryland Department of Transportation, but the Virginia Department of Transportation and also the DC Department of Transportation. Next slide. So this slide here is an overview of the FY 2021 schedule for Maryland, which MDOT established. The application process had a very quick turnaround this year, and not surprisingly, outreach was a bit difficult given the coronavirus pandemic, but we were still able to advance some projects. Next slide. And as it relates to the TPB selection process, and for brevity's sake, I won't go too deeply into details, but for a number of years, we've used similar procedures in the state. Our selection panel members reviewed and scored the application individually according to the system you see here. We met on July 7th to reach consensus decisions. Next slide. And on this slide, you should see a set of regional policies and criteria according to which we set forth our selection process and that our panel considers when they sort of do their deliberating and project scoring. Next slide. And here you should see a breakout of the sub-allocation for the year, or rather the proposed allocation for the year against the total pot of funding that was available relative to what will be left over as a function of the limited amount of projects this year. So this year for Maryland, we have $2.7 million available for our regional sub-allocation. However, there were only 2 eligible projects that we received for our region, 2 of which I'll sort of unpack in later slides. The first of which is signal modification plus pedestrian safety and access improvement project from Prince George's County. And the second project is a safe routes to school enhancing bike and bike safety project in Tacoma Park. And our selection panel is recommending full funding for both of these projects for a total of $1,505,881. Now, before we review the 2 recommended projects in more depth, I would like to note that the funds that are unallocated this year will be rolled over into the next year's sub-allocation, and we'll be working with MDOT over the coming year to conduct more extensive and earlier outreach for next year's solicitation to make sure we receive more applications and more eligible applications. Importantly, we certainly do not want to leave funding on the table, and we look forward to sharing a much larger package of projects with you all next year. So segueing to the deeper dive on the 2 recommended projects in question. Next slide. I do want to emphasize that the 2 recommended projects are both excellent projects. And as I noted already, these projects are both focused on safe routes to school. They also serve many of the TPB's key regional priorities and policies. For example, the majority of the school sites in the Prince George's project are in or within a half mile of an activity center and are in or within a half mile of an equity emphasis area, while the Tacoma Park project is also in a regional activity center and is within half a mile of 2 equity emphasis areas. And as a result of this work, I guess broadly, the work funded through these grants, there will be implementations along the lines of new sidewalks, new crosswalks, and continuing primary school education, hopefully ultimately resulting in fewer kids being harmed going to and from school as a function of the sort of lack of transportation, connective infrastructure, or infrastructure that would otherwise present harm to kids as they get to and from school. So going to, and we can stay on this slide here, but sort of delving a little more deeply into the Prince George's project in particular. The Prince George's TAP project will receive nearly $1.5 million. And in some ways, it's actually like many separate projects that will make targeted improvements to improve pedestrian accessibility and safety around 19 Prince George's County public elementary schools, and will upgrade traffic signals and traffic signals at 2 dangerous intersections, improve pedestrian accessibility around elementary schools, and include the installation of clear and continuous ADA compliant sidewalks, crosswalks, ramps, roadway signs, and rectangular rapid flashing beacons. The 2 signal modification projects will include grid smart video detection, the latest audible pedestrian signal equipment, countdown timer, and ADA compliant handicap ramps. So that takes us to the Tacoma project. And then the City of Tacoma Park, we are recommending funding to continue the city's excellent Safe Routes to School programming. This year in particular, funding will support bike rodeo kits, including bikes and gliders, helmets and props to conduct learn to ride and bike safety education during physical education classes at 5 schools, and also a feasibility study to determine whether and how to implement a traffic garden, which would be a miniature child-scale traffic town providing a safe space for children to improve their bicycling skills and learn how to safely share road space with other users. And lastly, the funding will cover materials and development for pedestrian and bike safety messaging, design and printing to help ease the transition to busier streets, and the like in a post-COVID world, excuse me. So that wraps up the presentation. Our next steps, we are seeking your approval for Resolution R2-2021 today. And after that, we will work with MDOT to make sure the projects proceed to design, construction, and implementation. So with that, that concludes my presentation. If you're interested in knowing more detail about the projects in particular, please refer to the memo in the attachment. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jaleel. What a great presentation and some really terrific projects. So I will invite questions. I will invite a motion for approval first.
So moved. Second from Earl Lewis at MDOT.
And who was the motion maker? I'm sorry.
Denny Tavares, Prince George's County.
Thank you, Ms. Tavares. Are there any questions? And we'll start with the District of Columbia. Maryland?
This is Patrick Wyman from College Park.
Ms. Warhan?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. It's good that we're considering this. First of all, these are great projects. I entirely appreciate and support the work that the staff has done on this. The question I have is just in concern about the amount of money that we're leaving on the table this year. And I understand that it's going to be coming back next year, but I can't help but think at the same day that we're reviewing the Capital Trails Network that we're missing an opportunity to help move some of those pieces of that greater Capital Trails Network forward with the Transportation Alternatives Program. And I'm wondering if staff has had a chance to really sort of look into and dig into a little bit more why there weren't more applications this year, why we aren't using the Transportation Alternatives Program more to help fund the development and construction of that network.
Certainly, Mr. Wayan, this is Kanti. I'll have Jaleel or John respond to why this year the program was a bit undersubscribed. But in terms of the preserving this money and being able to use it for other unmet needs, certainly the National Capital Trail Network that the board is scheduled to review and consider adopting later today, all of those provide excellent opportunities for projects either to be taken to preliminary engineering or perhaps even construction phase as we move on to greatly improve the non-motorized mobility in the region. So the next year's application process, as Jaleel alluded to, we plan to start early. We plan to do some additional outreach But this year, it is a little bit of, there's an impact a little bit of the times we are in and the timing of this whole program. So Jalil and John, please feel free to add.
Conti, this is Earl Lewis with MDOT. I could also add something here. So in FY 2020, MDOT SHA made a decision at TPB's request that the selection panel would only fully fund projects. This policy change made the TAE funds more effective and forced the selection committee not to partially fund projects so everyone gets a piece. Again, as Jalil mentioned, the leftover funding is being carried over to future years. It also can be used to cover unforeseen increased costs for water projects throughout the year. I think this has happened in Virginia already. We can discuss more in our prep meeting, but we're really looking forward to the projects that are submitted next year and being able to apply this $1.2 million to those with any additional funding we have in FY21.
Thank you.
Is there?
I appreciate that. I'll follow up a little bit more offline because I have some additional questions.
Yep, appreciate it. Thanks for the question, Patrick.
Hi, this is Casey from Tacoma Park. I just wanted to chime in on a separate issue, although I agree that we want this to be as utilized as possible, and we want people to be applying for it in large numbers so that we have lots of projects to choose from. I just wanted to say I think both of the projects seem very strong and will really benefit the region. And I wanted to specifically call out the Tacoma Park project, which I know a little more about, and say I think this is going to be a project that is very beneficial to connecting our kids to schools and providing more opportunities for biking. And particularly, one of the elements is some messaging and design to help transition from the quieter streets to the busier streets. And in order to get around Tacoma Park, for kids to get from their homes to the schools, many of them are located on pretty busy streets. And so I think this will be very beneficial to help in that process and that connectivity. So I think I appreciate the look at this project, and I think it'll be a positive project moving forward.
Thank you, Casey. Is there anybody else from Maryland that wants to comment? DC? I think I said that. Virginia? WMATA and other federal agencies?
Madam Chair, this is
John. I think we're ready.
This is John Swanson.
Yes,
I just want to emphasize that we were concerned about leaving money on the table as well. We discussed the possibility of doing a supplemental solicitation this year, and that seems it's going to, like, it's from the MDOT perspective, would be too onerous, but we are looking forward to really doing extensive outreach for next year. So thank you.
Thank you for that. All right, we're ready to call for a vote. I will call only for nays or abstentions. We'll start with the District of Columbia. Maryland. Virginia. And WMATA or other federal agencies. All right, hearing no objections or abstentions, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much. We are now on to the safety recommendations. We received a detailed staff briefing last month that summarized the work activities that our staff have undertaken over the past 18 months. Importantly, we discussed the essential elements of a safety resolution that we could adopt today. We heard of the various proven engineering and educational strategies to help address the types of crashes that are disproportionately represented on our region's roadways. We also heard of various strategies related to roadway operations that are proven to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. There was a very good discussion on the enforcement aspects of a few strategies related to roadway operations, specifically the potential for additional negative interactions by police and communities of color. Those frank discussions led us to agreeing that in a call for safety strategies, whether these are engineering, education, or enforcing safe operations, all should be implemented equitably and fairly. I, the vice chairs, and a couple of other board members who volunteered to help, Mr. David Snyder from Falls Church and Ms. Casey Kostick from Tacoma Park, advised staff on developing the draft safety recommendations resolution R3-2020. We have in our packets the draft resolution, as well as a memo that describes the specific changes made to the essential elements of a safety resolution that we discussed last month. I will ask Conti to review the various parts of the resolution. Then I will first seek a motion to adopt Resolution R3-2021, followed by discussions and potential amendments to the resolution, and then I'll call for a vote. I will note that while today's action may appear like the culmination of the board's work over the past 18 months, it is just the beginning of our work, where ours is vision zero, or towards zero deaths. Conti, will you walk us through this item, please? Thank
Certainly,
you.
Madam Chair. Thank you. I'll first review the resolution document, the various whereas clauses that will provide some background to the TPB's action today, and then I will briefly review the specific elements under the resolve clause. The resolution starts with the recognition that the TPB's policy documents have noted safety as an important element of its vision, acknowledges that the new federal mandate for TPB is to adopt roadway safety targets. It documents the TPB's dissatisfaction of the state of safety outcomes on our region's roadways as represented by the data that was used to establish the safety targets. The resolution mentions that this safety study, for the first time in our region, compiled the roadway safety data for the entire region in one place and analyzed to better understand both the predominant causes behind the fatalities and serious injury crashes, as well as the locations where these crashes were occurring. And the resolution notes that the year-long exploration of this data, coupled with working with the state safety engineers, TPB Safety Subcommittee, the Citizens Advisory Committee, and other stakeholders, resulted in identifying a set of actions that the members of the region could individually and collectively take, in addition to any others that may be appropriate in the aspects of roadway design, engineering the roadways, educating the public, and the way traffic is operated on our roadways. The resolution then acknowledges that regrettably, there is a history of traffic law related safety enforcement actions nationally and regionally, where those enforcement have been in ways that are discriminatory, exclusionary, or have had disparate impacts on people of color and marginalized communities, and calls for the unconditional commitment to equity and anti-racism, noting that all safety measures, including those that are attached to this resolution, should be applied with particular attention to the equity emphasis areas identified by the TPB. With this as background and context, the document leads to a resolve clause that binds two TPB statements together, the TPB statement on equity and the TPB's statement on safety. I'll now briefly review the resolve clauses. As previously noted and consistent with the TPB's action earlier today, there is a TPB safety statement which says that every action that the TPB considers, including every debate we have and every decision we make as the region's MPO, must be viewed through the lens of justice, equity, and fairness. We must recognize past actions that have been exclusionary or has had disparate impacts on people of color and marginalized communities. And we must take actions to correct or mitigate the resulting unfairness. From infrastructure to education and enforcement, we must act fairly to ensure equitable and true access to safety, accessibility, and mobility. And that the TPB officers and staff are committed to this vision. So, hand in hand with this equity statement, the safety actions that the TPB's resolution calls for has 4 sections to it. Section 1 has 3 specific actions that addresses the predominant causes for fatalities and serious injuries in our region, and what actions have been proven to be most effective in addressing these 3 predominant causes of fatalities and serious injuries. Section 2 calls on members to identify and implement any and all applicable strategies that will reduce these 3 types of fatalities and serious injury crashes that are seen most often in our region. And the 3 types of crashes we see most often in our region are those involving pedestrians, those at intersections, and those along major arterials. So the resolution also provides a list of about 50 strategies to be considered that research has shown is most effective. But these strategies are not intended to be comprehensive or all-inclusive, and it certainly does not preclude any jurisdiction from considering and implementing any other proven strategies to reduce fatalities and serious injury crashes in our region. Section 3 then commits the TPB to establish a regional safety assistance program at about $250,000 annually. And this program is intended to assist the TPB member jurisdictions and agencies in their effort to identify and develop safety strategies. It could be to consider an idea, to collect some data, analyze the data, develop some engineering, develop some marketing material, educational outreach, any of those, very similar to the Transportation Land Use Connections program that the TPB has been implementing now for a little over 10 years. And the final section, Section 4, calls on the TPB members to adopt safety goals consistent with Vision Zero or towards zero deaths. And it also calls to adopt procedures that will increase the use of ignition interlock devices for people who are convicted of impaired driving. That is a quick review of the resolution, and there are 50-odd strategies are attached to the resolution. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Kanti. It's just a question before we, well, let me do this first. I would like to ask for a motion to approve the resolution, the safety resolution.
Madam Chair, Dave Snyder, I make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Is there a second?
Second, this is Patrick Wyan from College Park.
Thank you for the second. On to questions and discussions. And so let me just ask this question, Kanti. Earlier, we approved the resolution and the equity statement was slightly revised. Shall we reflect the language in this to be the same as that?
Yes, that would be a pertinent thing. I would defer to the maker of the motion and those seconding it, that if they would accept that as a friendly change.
Okay, so I will ask the motion maker in second if we can change the equity statement to mirror that. I see a chat. Patrick Glenn accepts as friendly. Mr. Snyder?
Madam Chair, yes, that's a friendly amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will move on to discussions then, and we will start with questions and discussions from the District of Columbia. Okay, we'll move on to the state of Maryland. Questions or discussion?
This is Earl Lewis. Go ahead. You go first.
Either way is fine. Thank you. I guess I'll go ahead. This is Casey.
Ms. Costic, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I first of all just want to say a big thank you to the staff for putting this together and for all the work the board has done over the past couple of months, I guess year or more actually, in terms of looking at this and advocating on safety issues and looking for ways that we can make a real difference in improving safety in the region. As Chair Russell referenced earlier, we had a small group of people working on some concerns about the primary seatbelt enforcement provision that is included in the chart at this point in time. And I want to thank everyone in that group for a really collaborative effort and for improvements to the resolution that I think have made a really big difference and have made it a much better resolution. For me personally, I still have outstanding concerns about the board passing a provision advocating for primary seatbelt enforcement. And so I believe that primary seatbelt enforcement, while in this case absolutely intended to save lives and reduce fatalities and serious injuries, I have really serious concerns about the impact on communities of color. We know that there are many examples of racist police enforcement of policies that themselves are meant to be race neutral, and that when Black and brown residents are stopped by police, they're disproportionately searched and often consequences can be fatal. So for me, I will not be able to support this resolution for that reason only. I believe the rest of the provisions are extremely important and will move us as a region forward in a very positive way. But I do have concerns about that provision and don't feel that's the best direction to move forward on.
Thank you, Ms. Kosick. Mr. Lewis.
I would like to second the initial comments of the prior speaker, how great it is that the Transportation Planning Board have a positive impact in the perspective for vehicle and roadway and pedestrian safety. I would also add that and I think all the comments related to making sure that the vehicle laws are applied in a way that don't adversely impact communities of color. As a person of color, I also don't want unintended consequences to happen as well. I mean, I'll just give an example. I have 3 sons. One of those sons, when he was early in his driving age, did not want to wear a seatbelt for some reason. He got more than 1 ticket for not wearing a seatbelt, and now he wears a seatbelt all the time. So I think it's very important also that we recognize that, and in all those incidents, he never had any bad incident with law enforcement who gave him the tickets. He knew he was in the wrong, and it influenced his later life in wearing a seatbelt. So I think that's important also, and we just have to keep that in consideration when we look at the big picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis, for that. Is there anybody else from Maryland that would like to make comments? We'll move on to comments from the Commonwealth of Virginia. Hearing none, WMATA or other federal agencies? Okay, last call for any more comments or discussion from anyone before we take the vote. Very good. I will call only for nays or abstentions, and I will start with the District of Columbia. In the state of Maryland?
Nay. Casey Kosick, Tacoma Park.
Virginia? WMATA, and other agencies. So the motion passes with 1 in opposition. Thank you so much. I think this is landmark work. And
One
look forward to
abstention.
the positive benefits. I'm sorry, a late abstention from?
Denny Taveras. I agree with her on the pedestrian issue.
Okay, so the motion passes with 1 opposed and 1 abstention. That's it. Okay. Time lapse taken account for. Thank you all so much. Again, this is landmark work. So we're going to move on now to the transit access focus areas. We received a detailed staff briefing last month that summarized the work activities that our staff undertook per our directive over the last 18 months. We're being asked to adopt this list of high-capacity transit station areas that the TPB would like to be the focus of investments at state and local levels, as these are opportune locations for improving access to transit in the region. After an update from John and a review of the resolution, I will seek a motion to adopt Resolution R4-2021 by discussions and a vote. So John, go ahead and take us through your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate this chance to come back again. I gave you an extensive briefing in June, spoke about methodology and how we developed a list. Since then, several of you and have revised the list slightly, but it's basically the same story. So I'm not going to go through this presentation in any great detail. I think that folks have had a chance to sort of see this, and I would encourage you, particularly if you're interested in the methodology, to have a look at the memo and see how we came up with this list, which included both a regional analysis and a lot of local outreach. I'll just begin though by saying what we're doing here is identifying a limited list. In this case, we have 49 station areas, a limited list of places, which we're calling transit access focus areas, where we think these are prime locations for pedestrian and bicycle improvements. These are places where sidewalks, crosswalks, trails are currently lacking. We see that there's room for improvement. We also see that there's demand for improvement. These are places that have high concentrations of jobs and population. And so we started this project with a list of 208 station areas. That's 208 places that we know are going to be have transit, high capacity transit in the next 10 years by 2030. So those 208 station areas, which is our baseline, that's 3% of the region's land area. It's also nearly half of the region's anticipated jobs in 2030. And it's nearly a quarter of the population is going to be in that 3%. So this is a precious asset. And we're looking to figure out how we can make sure that in this limited land area that folks can walk and bike to and from transit. And with the Transit Access Focus Area project, we're actually narrowing it down even further, going from that 208 station areas down to 49, which we've highlighted as priority locations. So I'm going to ask, rather than going through the whole presentation, which you've pretty much seen before, I'm going to ask Sergio to please forward it to slide number 7, which is the map. There you go. So this is our list, 49 places. You can, in the mail out material, you can see that actual places identified and the methodology for obtaining this list. But I'll just say at the end of the day, this is what we've come up with. It is 49 places, and they are in 17 of the TPB's member jurisdictions. And as defined for this project, the TAFAs are small circular areas, the land around the stations. We're not interested in the stations so much as the land around the areas, both inside and outside of walk sheds that currently exist. The walk sheds, again, are the areas that are currently perceived to be walkable, but we really want to think about the areas outside of those walk sheds that are within that half mile. That's prime land for improving ped bike access. The TAFAs lie along a variety of different transit systems. The majority are on existing metro, existing lines, including many along metro lines and commuter rail lines. There's also a lot of forthcoming projects, Purple Line, Silver Line Phase 2, BRT in Montgomery and Fairfax, And then we have 3 bus-only transit centers, places that we really think were important to include in this project because there's a lot of ridership and a lot of buses connecting and a lot of people who are transit dependent. They're in relatively dense locations. I already mentioned the baseline 208 station areas was about 3% of the region's land area. Well, this 49 areas are about less than 1% of our land area, but they'll have 11% of the region's jobs and 7% of the region's population. So again, that's these are prime folks to get moving to and from transit on foot or by bike. I want to say that the list is very much focused on equity, which is top of our minds these days. Out of the 49 locations that you see here, 43 of them are in equity emphasis areas, which are the geographies that the TPB had identified as places with high concentrations of low income and minority communities. So finally, I want to mention that the TOFAs are not written in stone. This is a process. This is our first attempt to develop a list like this, which will accompany our list of other places where we put attention, equity emphasis areas, activity centers. This is something where we do intend to revisit this on a periodic basis and potentially revise the methodology and revise the list. We are looking to see progress in these places and potentially take some places off the list because they're become so incredibly walkable that they don't need to be on the list anymore. I'll say that since I presented the list to the board in June, we've made a few changes, and I'll just highlight them. They've been included in the memo. They were noted, and this was based on input we received since June and at the June meeting. For Rockville, we replaced the station there with the Rockville, the Twin Brook station with the Rockville Town Center. And for Gaithersburg, we replaced, we included Lake Forest bus-only transit center instead of the Metropolitan Grove station. A couple of other corrections that were made. The Tacoma Park station area was incorrectly labeled as light rail only, and it's in fact multimodal with the BRT coming there. And it's been brought to my attention that Rockville also should be labeled as a multimodal station area as well with the MARC service and forthcoming BRT as well as Metro Rail. So, Sergio, could we move to the resolution? There we go. Okay. And if you could just go to the scroll to the end of the resolution, the resolve clauses. The resolution speaks to the work that preceded this. I mean, going back to the TPB vision, the TPB has emphasized the importance of ped bike access, the importance of activity centers, and the importance of circulation within activity centers. Visualize 2045 called attention to 7 aspirational initiatives. One of them is increasing bike ped access to transit. And what we're doing here is really putting some geographic specificity to that concept. So we're adding this identifying these 49 places where we'd like to really shine a spotlight. We're going to use the list to as one of the criteria for selecting projects for the Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program, which Jaleel talked about earlier, as well as for the TLC program. And we more broadly like to work with our member jurisdictions to figure out how we can promote improvements in these locations in the short term. This is really something where we see a lot of opportunity in the very near term future. So with that, we're excited to present this list to you for final approval and look for your approval of resolution R4-2021.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, thank you, John. Yes.
It's Bridget Newton, Rockville. I wanted to say thank you. I wanted to say thank you to John and the staff for all the work on this. I'd like to move approval.
Thank you, Mayor Newton. Is there a second?
Second. Kristen Umstadt, Loudoun County.
Well, we have 2 seconds, so I'll take Ms. Armstead because she was louder. Okay, so I will now invite questions and comments by jurisdiction, as we've been doing all afternoon, from the District of Columbia first. Great. From the state of Maryland. From Virginia. And from WMATA or other agencies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Swanson, this is fantastic work. You've really done a lot to advance a topic that frankly wasn't on anyone's radar 10 years ago. These pedestrian improvements that bring access to transit are among the most cost-effective measures we can make to reduce congestion in this region and really open up economic opportunity for our most vulnerable population. So thank you for doing that. I do know that one of the challenges that you faced is to, in effect, make sidewalks sexy again, to convey their importance to the transportation network, and you've done that admirably. So we heartily support the resolution. I do know that as a unit, our challenge is to help these projects now compete for what are oftentimes limited resources, despite the fact that they have tremendous returns on investment. So we believe that these TAFAs and associated work will be most useful in the long term if we can find a way to pair them with some sort of larger regional funding paradigm that can support their construction so that they don't get out-competed in the noise for mega projects. But thank you very much, Mr. Swanson. Excellent work. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. Appreciate that. Is there any other comment from any of the other agencies?
Madam Chair, this is
okay. Kanti, please.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on Sham's comments, and that is really the key with everything that we have done today. For example, starting with the equity statement, it is a great first step to codify what our values are, but it needs to be lived and delivered every day. That approach applies equally to the transit access focus areas. It took us 18 months, a lot of coordination with the local jurisdiction staff and transit agencies to identify, but while that was good work, it can only be good if it is actually realized. So I think I completely agree with Sham's point that this needs to get into the decision-making, particularly with transportation investment decision-making forum. So based on today's action, we'll be happy to work with the chair and the officers to communicate this list of projects to every member jurisdictions and to the sub-regional entities that do have programming decisions on transportation funding. And we can do that every time that this list is updated.
That's fantastic. Absolutely perfect. Thank you so much. I think the TPB now has a new tagline, making sidewalks sexy again. I'm going to get a t-shirt made. Hearing no more comments, I will call for nays or abstentions, beginning with the District of Columbia. Maryland. Virginia. WMATA and other federal agencies. Hearing no nays or abstentions, the motion passes unanimously. Wonderful. Next on to the National Capital Trail Network. We received a detailed staff briefing last month that summarized the work activities that our staff undertook for our directives over the past 18 months. We are being asked to adopt a map of network of trails for the region called the National Capital Trail Network. This map represents the opportunities we have in this region to prioritize investments at state and local levels to build a network of trails that will provide for non-motorized travel throughout the region. This is not just a transportation infrastructure initiative, rather, one with the potential to improve health outcomes, build stronger connected communities, and improve the overall quality of life. After the update from Michael and a review of the resolution, I will be seeking a motion to adopt Resolution R4-2021, followed by discussions and a vote. Mike, we'll hear from you now. Thanks for your patience.
Oh, very good. Thank you very much. And all right, so I hope everyone can hear me. If we could probably, the board has already been briefed on this map, so and on the National Capital Trail Network. So I think I'll follow John Swanson's cue, and if you could advance the slides to the map. Very good, thanks. All right, so the major change since you saw this last time is that we have made a few small corrections within the city of Manassas. So there is a link there to a interactive map where you can see the details of the city of Manassas or anything else. I think that another thing that is new since the last time is that we've done, some preliminary analytical work on the network, and we now know, roughly how many people we've done a buffer analysis, which will tell us how many people it's going to serve. So we expect that within a half-mile buffer, we will have more than 4 million residents who have easy access to this, regional trail network. We'll have over 2.5 million jobs that will be accessible. 136 of our regional activity centers will be within a half a mile of this network, so easy walking distance. And about 308 of, I believe, our 351 equity emphasis areas will also be within a half mile of the network. And so total length is over 1,400 miles, of which 645 miles currently exist. So we're already quite a ways towards building this, but I think that once we get those connections made, I think we'll see that really having a really complete interconnected network where you can get onto a low stress facility within relatively short distance of your home and go to almost everywhere else in the region, I think is going to be really transformative, really valuable in terms of reliable, accessible, low cost, healthy transportation. So I guess with that, if we could move on to the resolution, and maybe then the very last segment where it will be. All right, so the resolution will, first of all, adopt the National Capital Trail Network as you see it, and it will direct TPB staff to undertake the following activities. So give additional consideration to projects that will implement portions of the network for transportation alternatives and transportation land use connections funding. Now, we already do this with the National Capital Trail, which is just the circumferential route from Visualize. But this new network incorporates and replaces the National Capital Trail. So now it will be a plus factor for funding for projects all over the region that are part of the network. We will report on progress towards implementation of the network on an annual basis, so we can see how fast we're moving forward towards getting this network built. And we will update the regional network on an annual basis in order to reflect anticipated new agency bicycle and pedestrian plans. And lastly, the TPB will ask its members to prioritize projects, programs, and policies that will implement portions of the National Capital Trail Network, with the proviso that all projects, programs, and policies must be implemented in an environmentally sensitive and sustainable manner, consistent with the TPB vision. So I think that's all I'll say for right now.
Madam Chair, this is Emmett Jordan out in Greenbelt. I'd like to move for adoption of Resolution R5 2021 to approve the National Capital Trail Network.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Is there a second?
Christian Dorsey from Virginia seconds.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dorsey. I think Mr. Brown was wanting to third, so I'll just add that in. Okay, we will move to questions or discussion. We'll start with the District of Columbia. Maryland?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
This is Neil Harris from Gaithersburg. My only question is where the data comes from for the map, because I noticed there are no trails shown for Gaithersburg. And we do have trails here, and some of them connect to county trails, which I also don't see on the map.
Okay.
So the question is, what can we do to get you the information?
Sorry, we got our information from Montgomery County Planning. And so we have, we have a Gaithersburg planner, I believe, on our distribution list for the bicycle and pedestrian plan. And so I think there's been an opportunity to contribute trails. However, if we have, for some reason, not made a connection, I think we will update this within a year, so we'll have an opportunity to add additional facilities.
All right, I will kick some people and make sure that we get you the information that you need.
Gently, please.
That was not meant literally. Thank you.
Yeah. Are there any other questions or comments from Maryland?
So this is Patrick Wine, Mayor of College Park. I just want to heartily endorse this effort. As full disclosure, I also work in my day job for Rails and Trails Consultancy, which is part of the Capital Trails Coalition. But I just want to note that during these challenging times that we've been dealing with, that people have turned to biking and walking as an important means of recreation, and also a way for people to get around. And as we face challenges, the challenges of reopening, and as the pandemic continues to impact our communities, it shows how important it is to be able to have opportunities to get out safely, walk and bike, both as a means of recreation and transportation. So I think it's very, very, very timely that we're taking this up and adopting this network, and wholeheartedly endorse this moving forward.
Thank you. Is there any other comments from Maryland? From
yes,
Virginia?
I think that was
just a huge thank you. Just a huge thank you to our staff for reaching out to us and helping to add Loudon to the map. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. That was Virginia. Anybody else from Malata or anybody else? Okay. I will ask only for nays or abstentions. Are there any from the District of Columbia? Maryland? Virginia? WMATA and other agencies? All right, we'll consider that as unanimous consent. Congratulations. This is really very, very exciting for a lot of people all over the region. It's been a tremendous amount of work. So thank you very much. Last item is a notice item. This is a proposed amendment to update projects and funding in the District of Columbia section of the FY 2021-24 TIP We're issuing notice of the intent to update our TIP in September to reflect funding to DDOT's projects. And I guess, Sebastian, this is the last action that you will be taking with the Transportation Planning Board. Is there anything that you would like to add?
Sure. This is actually Leslie from the District Department of Transportation. Jim had to hop off, so he's missing his last hurrah. But I have appreciated his dedication to this board. Thank you, Madam Chair. The District Department of Transportation is requesting this amendment to the FY21 to FY24 Transportation Improvement Program to update our project and funding information for the full 4 years of the TIP program. The purpose of this amendment is to align the TIP program with the district's annual budget update. And just wanted to note there's some minor corrections that have been made to the materials that were posted last week and the revised draft of the materials posted this morning. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Tell Mr. Sebastian again that we will miss him. So, gosh, we made it at 1:59. I'm just going to say this has been one of the best meetings I've ever participated in. Some of the things that we're doing are so exciting, and I can't thank staff enough for all of their hard work and also the board members for their support of all of these initiatives that we will be moving forward. And with that, I will say have a happy August. We'll see you in September. Be safe, be well, and if there is nothing else, we are adjourned on time.
Thank you.
I heard somebody say something.
Yeah, Madam Chair, it's Emmett Jordan. It's Emmett Jordan.
Mr. Jordan.
I have a request. In preparing for the TPB meetings, I find it difficult sometimes to download the way the agenda is set up with 10 or 12 different attachments is a little cumbersome. And I'm just wondering if it's possible somehow, realizing that it would be a very large document to post the entire packet as one link that people could download. That's a personal preference for me. I don't know if this was the practice in the past or if it proved to be difficult, but I'm wondering if that might be possible.
I would like to second that suggestion.
Madam Chair, this is Kanti.
Kanti.
That's certainly something we'll definitely look into and try to see how best we can make it available. Sometimes the documents tend to be rather large, but I'm sure there are ways we can try and make it more convenient for our members to access all of the documents. Thank you for the suggestion, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the consideration, staff. And with that, I call this meeting to a close. We are adjourned. Thank you.